I think it's really hard today to be a startup software company and grow an engineering and a product team in America, particularly the expensive parts of America.
Welcome to SaaS That App, building B2B web applications, the podcast where we share real-world stories, practical advice, and tech insights for those building or thinking about starting a tech-enabled business. I'm your co-host, Aaron Marchbanks.
And I'm Justin Edwards. Each week we bring you the stories, strategies, and insights you need to build your SaaS or tech-enabled business smarter, not harder. Let's dive right in.
Hello and welcome to SaaS That App. My resident co-host, Justin Edwards, is out today on another adventure, but I am excited to be joined by our guest today, Steve Benson. Steve is the founder and CEO of Badger Maps, the platform that helps outside sales reps ditch the admin chaos, optimize their routes, and get back some 20% of your time to actually sell. Sounds awesome. Before founding Badger, Steve led regional sales at Google and worked with other giants in the industry, so he has seen firsthand what slows down a sales team and what happens when you can remove that friction. He's also the host of Outside Sales Talk, runs multiple other ventures, including Badger Sales University and Grid Squid, which we'll get into today, and has spent over a decade building software that's not just smart, but useful. So, Steve, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. I'm super glad to be here.
Good deal. Well, we'll do the hardest question of them all right off the bat. Just to lay some groundwork for our conversation and for our listeners, can you give us a little bit of the broad strokes of kind of your professional career, specifically in the sales space, since that's what we're here to talk about?
Yeah, for sure. So I started at IBM in sales, went to their sales school. That was after my MBA, and from there I went to a company that got autonomy that got bought by HP, and then from there I went to Google. I was at Google for 4 years or so, and then I was working on their mapping team, also working with some of the other enterprise things like Gmail and Docs. And this is all on the go-to-market sales type side, doing some marketing stuff as well, mostly sales though. And then I cut it on my own and started Badger Maps in 2012, and I've been growing Badger ever since. Now Badger's got 92 employees, and we've got a couple products at this point, and I'm still running the company at this point. So it's a bootstrapped SaaS business. That's the quick overview on me.
Safe to say you've been involved in sales in some way, shape, or form for like pretty much your entire professional career.
Yeah.
Well, it makes a lot of sense then that your ventures into the world of technology have been geared towards sales and the sales process and salespeople. So just kind of curious, so at what point or points kind of along the way of your journey did you start to identify, some of the more pervasive problems or issues related to sales processes, salespeople, and then attack that with technology?
Well, I wish that I were a creative genius here, but I was working in a sales capacity, managing Google Maps API sales into the Western US. And I was so keenly aware of sales problems and keenly aware of the Google Maps API and what it was capable of. And this was when, mobile devices were just kind of taking off, right? Android was getting its legs under it. The iPhone had been around for a few years, but wasn't quite strong enough to run the first version of our app that we ended up building. It could only run on the iPad. But I guess I don't qualify as a creative genius because I was deeply involved in the things that I ended up building a solution for. So I understood the sales problems, I understood the solutions, I understood mobile. So it's kind of more of a right place, right time thing than skating to where the puck's going thing.
Yeah, can you give us an example or two of like some specific issues or problems that you wanted to address or that you wanted to attack?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that we were interested in was the experience of salespeople going out into the field and how we could help them leverage their mobile device, this supercomputer they were going to be walking around with in their pocket, right? And it was clear where phones were going at that point. There were posters on the walls everywhere at Google. What happens when phones and the internet are 100 times faster? So it was very clear that this times were changing. This was 2010, 2011, and salespeople are some of the most mobile users in the world, and so I wanted to solve mobile problems that salespeople were facing, and it was pretty clear that mapping was a part of that. Bringing maps to their connecting maps to their CRM, showing them the data that's in their CRM in a mapping environment, and then doing that all on their phone. It was pretty clear that that was going to be really useful to a lot of salespeople who, at the time, were running around juggling, a paper calendar, a paper map, a Rolodex. Maybe they had a CRM, but maybe they didn't. Maybe they just had a Rolodex with a bunch of cards in it.
The MapQuest days, print it out. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you could print out like how to get from one point to another with MapQuest. Exactly. Building one app on their phone that could do all those things and kind of synthesized all those things. It was pretty clear to me at the time that was going to be a pretty exciting solution for people, and also making CRMs a lot cooler for that group of mobile salespeople.
Sure, and since, like you said at the outset, the whole mission was get this technology or get this solution mobile friendly. These are users that not necessarily sitting at their desk making cold calls. These are ones that are actually going out into the field to visit people. So would it be fair to say that you're a pretty firm believer in that, like, the user interface and the user experience matters a lot since people are looking at this on their phones and their tablets?
Yeah. And the initial version was just all in the browser. And actually at the time, it was unclear. Google was saying at the time, "Oh, we think browser is the future and mobile apps are silly and this is all going to go away. These native apps are silly." But it was unclear at the time which direction that was going to go. And so our first version was, we just optimized it for the mobile on, like, in the browser. So you can use it in your computer, you could use it on your phone. But then, pretty quickly it became apparent that just for a speed and usability perspective, we were going to need native apps.
As I was kind of going through and reviewing the application itself, I mean, there's some really cool user interface features that I personally appreciate as a not salesperson that I thought were very interesting, like the lasso tool. I thought that was very slick to be able to kind of select these are the points that I want to hit today, and then from that lassoed loop of data points, it pulls that. So all that to ask, are these that feature in particular, but just features in general, are those things that you are birthing from analysis or desire, or are people, are your users saying it would be really great if, and that's what you're building? What's kind of your process for these features?
It depends. I think some ideas come from just our own ideas. Sometimes people can't describe a thing that they've never heard of or seen. Some users are kind of more visionary and really understand their problem and are using your product and like, "Hey, I would love it if it would do this." Early on, I really spent a ton of time talking with customers, way more than one would guess, right? So my job really early on, and I didn't code the application. My technical co-founder did, but early on, my whole job was talking with customers, getting their feedback, understanding their problems, and that guides what we should do next, right? That guides what we should create next. That guides, and you end up with a long list of features, but you want customers, especially towards the beginning, you want them to pull you in the direction of what to do based on, well, I would buy this if it could do this. And sometimes if it's a big company and it's a big feature, we would get them in contract being like, "Okay, we will build this for you for a $0 consulting contract, but we will build this for you." And that's when you start paying for a year for this product. And these are the acceptance criteria. And that was a way of kind of making sure it was worth our while and that someone was actually going to put their money where their mouth was. And it's like, well, and that's not as hard of a conversation as one might guess, right? It's just, you guys are describing exactly what we think a lot of people are going to want. We'd love to build it for you. If you guys agree and sign that you'll buy this, you won't pay. You can use the tool until that feature that you feel is so important is built. You don't have to pay for it. And then once it's built and completed, only then do you start paying. You can deploy it now. You can deploy it at that time, whatever you want. But until it's deployed to the spec that you described that we can put in the contract, we're not going to start charging you. And that's a great way to know that you're building the next big hard thing that people are actually going to value because, and they value it because they're going to pay for it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that does make it, I would think, a lot easier to get a feature off the whiteboard and like actually rolling because you've got somebody that's dedicated behind it. Have you ever taken the route of building a feature per organization, like specifically for them, or is it always a yes, we hear you, we think this would be a great feature, it's going to be for everyone every time, or are there instances where it's going to be for specific companies or organizations?
Well, we've solved problems for specific organizations, and generally it's reusable, right? A lot of the stuff that you do is reusable, but we want to avoid doing too much custom for someone unless it's a deal breaker. Like people, the list of things that people want is a mile long, but it doesn't. Often it's like they're like, oh, I wish it did this too, but it's like, yeah, but are you going to buy it the way it is? Because it seems to solve your problem, right? It seems to solve 98% of the problem. And so there are those cases. One thing that I've done there, if someone is going to get a lot of value, but they really do feel like they need a thing, but I'm not in as big of a hurry to build the thing because I don't think it's as important, is I'll say, okay, well, if you start buying it now, we promise to do this thing by this date. And this date could be a year out, year and a half out, but this is on the roadmap, but I don't just want to give you a blank promise that we're going to do something someday. You can stop paying if we're not done in 12 months from now. You stop paying, keep using. But so we're kind of, we're kind of putting our money where our mouth is, that we're going to be done by then. And people appreciate that, but there's not a gun to anyone's head. If they get it for free for 3 months because something else was way more important, then that's how it is. But it shows them that you got skin in the game and that you actually mean that you're going to get the thing and you're not just selling vaporware.
Staying relevant, staying valuable, staying sticky, as it were, in that space. So I want to turn attention a little bit more now to the team aspect of this and general sales, marketing, product lifecycle, that sort of a thing. I noted early on, I mean, you've led Badger now for well over a decade, and even before that, you had some tentacles into some of that sort of thing. And it's not often that we find founders sticking around for that long. A lot of times founders are entrepreneurs. They want to move on to their next idea or, hand that off to someone else. So what would you say, having been in this now for over a decade, has been the hardest thing to evolve over time and stay relevant? Is it the product? Is it the team? Is it the market?
I think the product has to just keep evolving and becoming better and solving more and more problems for more and more people. I think that's what's driven growth, and the competitors were non-existent or very weak early on, and there's more competition now in the space. I think it's become easier and easier to build basic versions of software. So, if someone is selling something for a fifth of your price and it's a fifth of the value, some people are still going to want that because that was the fifth of the value that they wanted. So there's a bunch of small apps floating around doing small pieces of what we do. But I wouldn't, I think the key to staying there's an advantage to being early, and as long as you keep staying relevant, keep creating value, and keep investing in the software product, because anyone that has entered the market later, and there's one company in particular that entered the market later, 5 years after us and stuff. So they've been around still now for 8 years, but they're still. It's kind of like you're always still those 5 years behind, and or maybe you're even slipping further because we have a whole bunch of engineers, and it's always harder to grow in someone's shadow because you either have to if they're a huge company that you're recreating the software, then there is room at the bottom. If it's a huge expense, like it's one thing for Zoho to rebuild Salesforce. There's a lot of room at the bottom that Salesforce is highly, it's an expensive product. It's a top tier product. They're by nature, there's room at the bottom. There's room for someone to be like, I'm going to build a cheaper, less functional version of Salesforce. And so that you can they can creep into that space. It's harder with a small company. And I think that's an important lesson from our little market is it's really hard to copy someone if they're a small company. Like you want to copy Microsoft, something that they do but aren't quite filling all the markets, and you want to like go after that specific market with a specific value proposition. But we've had several companies over the years just imitate our software. I don't know, and I'm always like, why are you copying me? I'm not that big. Like there's not a yeah, there's not like the 10% that I leave behind is that's not what you want. You don't want to do that. So you're gonna have to do something slightly different than we're doing, or else you're gonna be it's because they either you have to go for the we are cheaper and do less. It's hard to just be like, oh, we're just as good and charge the same, because you started 5 years later and obviously don't have the resources that someone who's been has a bunch of customers. It's like we get a VC round every year, like, but we don't. It's just revenue, and so we've always been bootstrapped, but like it's a VC round every single year, but we get to spend it, and so it's hard to join into that. It's hard to copy a piece of software and then and be successful and compete not just on building the software, but also on the marketing side, the fulfillment side, like the servicing of the customers. That's just as important as building the software is selling it, and just as important as this is making your customers successful with it. Just as important as marketing it. All these things there's so many pieces to this, and so it's really hard to compete with an established player unless you have some kind of competitive advantage, like they're really big and expensive and you can be cheaper, or they've neglected this vertical, like what Viva being so successful. Well, they're a niche CRM, but it's a big important niche. So and that has special needs. They pharma that Viva serves has very special needs around they're very highly regulated. They need to enforce policies on their reps. You're hardly allowed to sell drugs, right? It's very hard. There's so many rules. So it made sense that they had a vertical CRM that was just as expensive as Salesforce, or more expensive, I believe. That's a way to niche something off and carve something off, and it makes sense that Zoho did what they did. But I think if you are going after a market, it has to be if you're going after a sliver of a market that someone else is already doing, it's got to be a really big market. It should be a big company that you're taking a sliver from, not that they have to have neglected that sliver, basically.
You've talked several times now kind of about different elements of your team, sales, marketing, certainly engineering as it relates to, technology. And I think just our pre-call conversation and knowing what I can read about you, it seems like we kind of agree that there is a lot of importance on the team that you have, the team that you build, in the industry in general, but I think just in business in general. So what are your thoughts about building that team, a really great team, in the hiring environment that we have today?
The people you have on board early are the most important, right? Like the people that if you're bootstrapped, the first 5 years, right, you're probably not going to be that big. If you're venture backed, you're going to grow faster, obviously, and be able to hire faster. The capital up front to make those hires, but you have to be very careful about those early hires. There's really that's very challenging to make sure that a mistake there is life and death for the business. Later, I think it's really hard today to be a startup software company. For the last 10 years, I think it's been really hard to be a startup software company and grow an engineering and a product team in America, particularly the expensive parts of America. The big tech monopolies have just soaked up all the engineers, and so it's so it's hard. It's a hard place to do it, and so that's the bad news. The good news is math works the same everywhere in the world, and turns out there's talented humans all over the face of the planet. We're spread out all over the place, and everyone's brain works the same. So you can go to Nigeria or Eastern Europe or Asia or South Asia. There's talented humans all over the place, and so I think America's a tough place to grow a team really well, but there's a lot of places you can go and find really talented people that can build great software.
Do you look for people who are, let's say, sharing your vision or have some sort of a buy-in in some way, shape, or form to what it is that they're building or working on versus someone to fill a seat? I mean, do you have a preferred kind of an
Ideally,
approach?
yeah. I mean, ideally, you need someone who's you look for people that are a cultural fit with your organization, and I think in those early hires, especially, you need someone who's a good fit for a startup in general, and a jack of many trades, and can deal with ambiguity and look failure in the eye and or potential failure in the eye. There's a very real probability that any of these brilliant ideas don't work out at all, right? And you got to have people that are able to go the distance. Like it takes years to build something and get it off the ground, even if it's a great idea, particularly if it's bootstrapped. But I think so you want to look for cultural fits, and probably later on it's I think cultural that all that work you did up front is reinforcing as time goes on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it seems to be kind of universal that the best ideas are great, but also having experience and expertise in that same space matters. I do not have a sales and marketing background, so it would seem kind of silly for me to try to engineer something for sales and marketing people as an idea of my own because I don't have expertise in that vertical or that space.
Yeah, it really helps if the business side has expertise in the pain point of the customer. I think that was always made this all a lot easier for us, that I had been a salesperson, I had worked in this space, I understood the problem relatively deeply. It's a lot harder if you don't. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it'd be hard for me to turn around and run an insurance startup tomorrow, right? Because I don't know anything about insurance, right? So I think it's also hard to pick a great idea in a space that you don't know a ton about.
I agree entirely with that. So, kind of spinning off of Badger Maps in particular, and I think for organizations that have been successful, they have grown their startup into something that's 5, 10, 15 years down the road. It's very mature. It has a lot to it. You presumably reach a threshold where you just simply decide, this is our lane and we're staying in it. Or there is some sufficient push behind some aspect or maybe multiple aspects of what it is that you've built that can be spun off into something else. You've launched Badger Sales University, you've launched Grid Squid, which I know is a very cool thing I want to talk about. But how do you know when an idea has reached the point of now spinning off another idea versus keeping it in like the core platform? When should it be its own thing and when should it kind of stay put?
Good point. I mean, I'd say in general, you want to be focused unless things kind of pop up that are obviously spinouts or ideas that obviously are so adjacent that it makes sense that you would pursue them. And adjacent can mean the technology is reusable the technology you built is reusable in another way. Like I sell to field salespeople and field service people, but if the problem that I was solving also serviced trucks really well, like trucks that are moving around, then that would be logical for me to extend into that. If I could add on a new feature set that my existing group of people that I'm selling to, field salespeople, sometimes I think it would almost start off as like a feature idea that you're like, that's such a good feature idea, but it really should be sold separately because you don't necessarily need those two things coupled together. You could want just one or just the other. And we did purchase a company of that nature that we run them as two separate companies. So they're not totally they're just two different companies really, but we bought it, but it's to serve the same market. And and then we've also done it the other way where we built a piece of technology that made sense to spin out, but it was and that needed to be spun out and not kept under the same umbrella because it was for a different buyer. So, Badger Maps is for field sales teams that want mapping and routing on their mobile device. We built a connector into all these CRM systems because we had to. So over time we had to build. We we started out building just one-off connectors into a couple of the CRMs, but a big, we needed to surface CRM data on a map, so we had to be able to connect to a CRM to do that, and we needed to be able to push data to that CRM as people used our app on their mobile device, and if there were updates coming through the data to the CRM, we needed that to push to the mobile device. So we need to basically have the data and connect to it in real time. We started using APIs to just connect directly to those CRMs. That became really hard to maintain and challenging for us because there's a lot of CRMs, and it's just, we actually stopped even after 2. It was clear that we shouldn't be maintaining this. It was very brittle and challenging. And then we bought a commercial product that was a broader connector product that connected lots of stuff to lots of stuff. And over time, we used that for years, probably 6 years or so, but it caused a lot of problems because it wasn't specialized, wasn't exactly what we wanted. We didn't, we really needed to just have our applications be syncing with these CRMs, and just by nature, because they connected to more things than just that. There was more complexity, and it was, caused a lot of problems basically. And so there was a lot of pain around maintaining our customers that we needed to, deploying our customers, et cetera. And we lost a certain amount of control. I think just the overhead of being a connector that was pretty broad, even though it's a leader in the space and is an excellent product, just its lack of being specific caused a lot of issues. And so eventually we went on the market. We were like, okay, we went on the market to find a tool to replace that was going to solve some of these problems, and it just didn't exist. And so so we kind of treaded water on that for a year, and then the people that deploy our software and maintain our software and deal with the customers who are using the integrations, they all complained enough that we're like, well, I guess we could build this thing. And I didn't want to do it. I was like, how has no one built this? Like, there wasn't one because it's not a good enough market, right? It's a small market to connect, small software companies to CRMs. It's just not like, if you went to a VC with that business idea, they'd be like, how big is the TAM on this? It's not that big. So how many ISVs are you? And you're like, oh, 7,000. They're like, that's not that. Maybe your whole world of people you can sell to a product that isn't that expensive is 7,000. That's bad. But we needed to build it for us, and so we built it for us. And so it didn't exist, so we built it basically. But there was a reason why it didn't exist. And then after it was built and we were using it, and it was, once we had it up and running, basically, we were like, okay, we should spin this out and make it available to other companies like us. And so that's a time when I think it is, we're a little small to be spinning out companies. Like we're making $8 million a year in top line ARR. Is that big enough to be spinning out other companies? No, I don't think if that was I think you probably want to wait until you're at least like 20 million to do that. But because we had a product that we basically our hand was forced on building, and it was hardened. I mean, it was like, yeah, it's running and works. And it was really when we deployed it to the new version of our product, and it was so easy and clean, and we're like, we can deploy this to anything. Like it was. So we were like, okay, well, now we're running it twice. So it basically has 2 customers, our old version and our new version. And it took 2 weeks to deploy to our new version. So we should. This is time to bring this out. It's hardened. But yeah, I think bottom line, it's not a good idea to be starting new companies until you're pretty big and should be looking for other income streams to maintain your growth rate. And if you're growing at 40% a year without it, then you probably shouldn't be taking your eye off the ball anyway. But there are times when it's just like, okay, we kind of have to do this because we stumbled across it. Like, Slack had to stop making video games, but release their new thing that they had built as a communication tool in the video games because it was just obviously a really good idea. Like it was appropriate to release that product too. And so that's, I think, the way I would approach it is wait till you're big enough to be making those types of strategic moves, unless your hand is effectively forced.
Yeah, you're in the space. You need to be able to do this. Something else doesn't do it well enough, or not well enough with your system. Yeah, you almost have to build it. I mean, we do a lot of systems integration ourselves, and for that very reason. It's not necessarily product oriented, but You got to get data from point A to point B better than this thing is doing it. And, your customer is one or two. It doesn't need to be an entire software service by itself. It's something that helps somebody get further down the road, and maybe others could use it if it works.
Another thing to think about, if it is much more adjacent and it's for the same product. I mean, obviously, our products are for two different people, right? Our two different products are for different people. But if you're building a feature on your existing product, but it's like, well, but this is also could be purchased alone, standalone. And there's a group of people who wouldn't even want our first product, but would want this feature of our product. Well, then you can release it as a feature of your product and also as a standalone product. Release it under two names, and that's fine too, right? So you can spin it out as a separate product, separate company, but just create a partnership agreement between yourself and that company that allows you to basically be a reseller of your other business. But that's really useful in that you can now market it totally separately, but also as a feature that enriches your current company. And it's a feature that you charge separately for under your existing product, but you charge but it can also be sold separately as a completely different product.
Yeah, no, that's a terrific point. So all that taken in total, what does the future of Badger look like? What's next?
I don't have any other products planned on the market here. We're just trying to grow the product at this point, and we're going to try to move from 8 to 10 as quickly as we can, basically. So that's really the goal.
I like it. Just keep the growth. So as a founder, you also host a podcast, you run multiple projects and products. And I'm assuming that like most founders or folks like yourself that have bootstrapped something or fired something up, you wear a lot of hats. And the do more pull is constant. What helps you stay focused when the do more is always there in the back of your mind?
I think I just try to get things done, right? I mean, it's just one thing after another, and there's always a big pile of stuff. And I try to either get things done fast, or delegate them, or say no to them as quickly as I can. And so it's a lot of decisions and a lot of choices. But there's only so many hours in the day, and so you can only do so much. So you do have to be able to delegate and surround yourself with great people that can catch those curveballs.
For sure. So last big question, general stuff. What kind of advice or wisdom do you have for other founders who are starting out, who are shooting to bootstrap something? What's going to help them?
I guess my first piece of advice is being a founder or a CEO of a tiny company. You're creating something is not really a job. Successfully founding a meaningful company, it's going to take away almost all your bandwidth. You can't be a good friend, a good son, a good daughter, mother, father, be in good shape, participate in hobbies or extracurriculars or your community. I think this is a bigger responsibility than a lot of things, especially if it starts working out a bit. So you should probably, you have, going into it, you have to accept all that and forget about the fun and hobbies that you have, and set expectations properly with everyone else in your life. I think you have to be ruthless with your prioritization of your time and how you're spending your time. You can still get your highest priorities in your personal life done. So you have to make hard choices around what those are, because if you don't, the choices will be made for you, and it won't necessarily be what's most important to you. It'll be what raises its hand the most. So you have to be ruthless around those prioritizations. It's really important to identify the things that really matter for the success of your business and your personal life, everywhere else, and you can only really get those things done. I would also say that it's not a time to have work-life balance. If that's what you want, like, go work for a big tech company or just a great big company like that. Work for a great mid-sized company. But like, you trying to create something, you just don't get to have work-life balance. I think getting the train out of the station is really, really hard. But the flip side to that is once the train's in motion, it's really hard to stop. So that's really that's the good news. Is once these things get going, it's great.
It's nice if there's good news. Yeah, don't plan to do anything else in your life. But once things get going, maybe you can again. It's not all doom and gloom.
And frankly, risk adjusted, it's not a good idea. Like know that like the work and risk adjusted calculus on this, it's not a good idea to start a startup unless it's really something you really want to do, because it's not easy. It's hard. It costs a lot. You have to give a lot to it, and it's hard to raise a baby. And so I've raised human babies and I've raised business babies, and the human babies are easier.
Okay, you heard it here.
You have to go into these situations with your eyes open and understand what you're getting into, and want that, right? Because I think a lot of people fall in love with the idea, but like I'd love to be my own boss. That'd be great. It's like, well, why do you want that? Is it because you want to work less? Because this is not that path.
That is not happening.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great advice. Steve, it has been a pleasure. I want to thank you so much for sharing your time and talents. We have been talking with Steve Benson, who, among other things, is the founder and CEO of Badger Maps. Steve, where and how can people reach you?
LinkedIn's a great place to get a hold of me. Just Google, I guess you can Google or LinkedIn, Steve Benson Badger.
And a special thanks as always to our listeners. If you like what you're hearing, have ideas for the show, or just want to tell us what's on your mind, throw a review our way, or subscribe if you are so inclined, and we will see you next time on SaaS That App. Thanks for cruising along with us on SaaS That App. We hope you grabbed some insights that were inspiring, actionable, or at least entertaining.
If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.
Until next time, keep building, keep growing, and keep those apps sassy.